The room fell silent for only a second, but that single second changed the course of my life. We had barely stepped inside the open house when an elderly woman greeted us with the warm confidence of someone who had spent decades recognizing love before people admitted it themselves. She smiled at my realtor, then at me, and cheerfully said how refreshing it was to see a husband and wife searching for a new beginning together. Before I could awkwardly explain that we weren't a couple, my realtor simply smiled, looked at me with calm eyes that carried more understanding than I deserved, and quietly said, "Not yet." Those two simple words echoed through my heart louder than anything I had heard in years. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness can heal broken hearts, that second chances are worth fighting for, and that love often arrives when we least expect it. Please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Your support helps us continue, sharing stories that remind us all to believe in the good that still exists in this world. 3 years before that unforgettable afternoon, I had convinced myself that my life had already reached its ending, even though I was only 40 years old. My marriage had collapsed after years of slowly drifting apart. The divorce was quiet, respectful, and painfully empty. We divided our belongings, signed the papers, and walked away carrying invisible wounds that neither of us knew how to heal. I kept the house because neither of us wanted to argue over it, but every room became a reminder that silence could be louder than shouting. I spent evenings eating frozen dinners in front of the television, pretending I enjoyed the solitude while secretly dreading weekends, when the loneliness stretched endlessly, from sunrise to bedtime. Eventually, I decided the house had become a museum dedicated to a life that no longer existed. Every hallway carried memories. Every window reflected a version of myself that looked exhausted. Selling it felt terrifying, but staying felt even worse. That decision was how I met Emily, the realtor assigned to help me prepare the property before listing it on the market. Emily wasn't the kind of person who tried too hard to impress anyone. She arrived carrying a notebook that looked well used, comfortable shoes instead of expensive heels, and a smile that never felt rehearsed. She asked thoughtful questions instead of making sales pitches. Rather than pointing out what was wrong with the house, she noticed what had once made it feel like home. She had an unusual gift for seeing possibilities hidden beneath disappointment, whether she was talking about old hardwood floors or tired people. Over the following weeks, we spent countless hours cleaning, organizing, repainting walls, and preparing the property for buyers. Somewhere between moving dusty furniture and sorting forgotten photographs, we began sharing pieces of our lives. She told me about losing her father unexpectedly and how grief had taught her to appreciate ordinary moments. I admitted that I no longer recognized the optimistic man I used to be. She never interrupted. She simply listened, as though every sentence mattered. What surprised me most wasn't that Emily understood pain. It was that she refused to let pain become someone's identity. Whenever I criticized myself for failed dreams or broken relationships, she gently redirected my attention toward what still remained. She believed people deserved compassion, especially from themselves. I had spent years believing my best days were behind me. Somehow, without ever trying to fix me, she made me wonder if they might still be waiting somewhere ahead. The house sold faster than expected, and soon we were visiting open houses together so I could find somewhere new to begin again. Every property represented more than walls and ceilings. Each one forced me to imagine a future I had almost stopped believing I deserved. Emily never rushed my decisions. She understood that I wasn't only searching for another address. I was searching for permission to hope again. That search brought us to the open house where everything shifted. The elderly woman who greeted us wasn't trying to embarrass either of us. She simply saw two people walking side by side with quiet familiarity. When she assumed Emily was my wife, I instinctively opened my mouth to correct her. Then, Emily smiled with gentle confidence and softly said, "Not yet." The woman laughed warmly before walking away to greet another visitor, completely unaware that she had just witnessed two hearts, skipping the same beat. For several long moments, neither of us spoke. I wasn't confused because Emily had lied. I was overwhelmed because, deep inside, I realized I wished she hadn't been joking. The drive back was unusually quiet. I replayed those words repeatedly, wondering whether I had imagined the tenderness behind them. Fear whispered that I was reading too much into an innocent moment. Hope whispered something entirely different. Days passed before I gathered enough courage to ask Emily if she wanted to have dinner after work, not as client and realtor, but simply as two people who enjoyed each other's company. She smiled exactly the way she had at the open house, and this time her answer came without hesitation. That dinner lasted nearly 4 hours. We talked about childhood dreams, embarrassing mistakes, favorite books, aging parents, unexpected heartbreaks, and the strange ways life sometimes leads us exactly where we need to be through roads we never wanted to travel. Neither of us pretended to be perfect. We had both been disappointed by life. We had both questioned our worth. Yet somehow, sitting across from each other, those scars no longer felt like flaws. They felt like proof that we had survived. Our relationship didn't become magical overnight. There were difficult conversations, moments of insecurity, and lingering fears from past relationships. I worried I would fail again. Emily worried about opening her heart after years of protecting it. But every challenge became another opportunity to choose patience instead of pride. We discovered that real love isn't built by avoiding brokenness. It's built by carrying each other's burdens without trying to erase them. Months later, I finally purchased a modest little house with large maple trees in the backyard. It wasn't the biggest property we had visited, nor the most impressive, but sunlight filled every room, and laughter somehow seemed easier there. Emily helped me unpack the last moving box. Standing in the empty living room, I realized this house already felt more like home than the previous one ever had during its final years. One rainy autumn evening, I returned to that same living room, carrying a small velvet box. My hands trembled so much I nearly dropped it before kneeling down. I told Emily that she had done something no contractor, therapist, or amount of time could have accomplished. She hadn't simply helped me find another house. She had helped me find myself again. She had reminded me that broken endings sometimes become beautiful beginnings when someone chooses kindness over judgment and hope over fear. Tears filled her eyes before I even finished asking. She smiled through those tears, laughed softly, and whispered, "Now, if this story has touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to Kindness Corner." Every act of support helps us continue sharing stories that remind people they are never too broken, too late, or too lost to find love again. Special request before you leave, please comment with the words, "Kindness always finds a way." We'd love to know where you're watching from and what part of this story stayed with you the most. A few months after our wedding, we received an invitation to a neighborhood charity event. As we walked into the community center holding hands, an elderly woman approached us with a familiar smile. It took me a moment to recognize her. She was the same woman from that unforgettable open house. She looked at us, then at our wedding rings, and her face lit up with joyful surprise. She admitted she had wondered ever since that afternoon whether she had accidentally embarrassed us. We told her she had done exactly the opposite. Her innocent assumption had given two frightened people the courage to admit what their hearts had already known. Sometimes life changes because of grand decisions, but sometimes it changes because a stranger unknowingly speaks hope into a moment of uncertainty. As we drove home that evening, I glanced at the woman sitting beside me and remembered the words that had once seemed impossible. At an open house, they had mistaken my realtor for my wife. She had smiled and said, "Not yet." Looking at the road ahead, I realized those two words had never been about wishful thinking. They had been about faith. Faith that healing was possible. Faith that kindness could restore what heartbreak had stolen. Faith that the right person doesn't rescue your life. They simply walk beside you until you remember how to live it yourself. And sometimes the greatest home we ever find isn't built with bricks and wood. It's built inside the heart of someone who chooses to stay.